It's a pleasure to be here this morning. All of my colleagues at IEA Hydrogen, thank you for this. And I'm particularly thrilled to be here because I am also a Southwesterner, and I got my energy start in New Mexico building solar homes and irrigation systems and off-grid power systems. But today, let's see, we're going to talk about, got the presentation loaded? We're going to talk about IEA Hydrogen. I think we'll start talking about IEA Hydrogen while our tech folks get the presentation up. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to talk to you about is our membership. We have now 21 members and 2 members engaged in the accession process. Here we go. Okay. And but before I tell you about our members, let me just tell you about what we do. This group is dedicated to the advancement of hydrogen. This is our mission, and we are working to accelerate its adoption. Our strategy is to use RD&D and an information exchange. Who are we? We are 2 kinds of members. We are contracting parties and sponsors. Contracting parties are governments, typically countries, but we also have the European Commission, and international groups. And by international groups, I mean legally constituted international groups, legally recognized, such as the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. And then we also are sponsors. Sponsors is it's not what you usually think of, because these terms were invented by international bureaucrats. So for those of you who think that space is the last frontier, no, it's really international law. So, so at any rate, our sponsors include, and this is important, a company called Shell, which is positioning itself as an energy company of the future. And for many of our members, they have energy companies. They've got oil and gas companies too, and they are positioning themselves for the future. It's a dream come true for us because it means that they are recognizing that the energy transition is underway. We also have a member called the Hydrogen Council. Who here has heard of the Hydrogen Council? Raise your hand. Okay. The Hydrogen Council is a global trade association, 60 members. Everybody at the party who right now deals with hydrogen. Because unlike renewable energy, hydrogen is already a big business. It's $1 trillion business in terms of assets and in terms of revenue. And so these companies that are now mostly in the industrial gas space want very much to move into the hydrogen space, the hydrogen energy space, and they're working to make that happen. So what do? We do RD&D, as I said, and we do 3 kinds of work. Classic RD&D, analysis, and outreach efforts. The RD&D is often, typically supported by techno-economic analysis. Who here has heard of techno-economic analysis? Okay, well this is what accompanies the work of exploring new technologies to make sure you have efficiency and economy, etc. And so I'll just say that the green ones, the green section over there, these are our current tasks. The yellow are the tasks that we have in definition. I just want to call your attention to the bottom here, which you may not be able to see, but in definition, we now have a task called export supply. So we're actually getting to the point where hydrogen is going to be traded. Yes, as Mr. Horvath said, it's absolutely going to be traded. So we produce all kinds of products, annual reports, report for each task, interim reports. These are public documents. Of course, you can follow us on Twitter. Follow us at IEA _hydrogen. And I just want to mention that we are going to have a workshop on hydrogen production with CCUS on the 6th of November in Paris. Now this is going to be with some of our sister organizations, but it is open to the public. So if you're interested, this announcement will be on the website, and you can also talk to me. Okay, so how did we get started? Who are we? Who here has heard of the OECD, the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development? Okay, organized after World War II to promote economic prosperity. Who here remembers the oil and gas crisis, being there already reading about it? Okay, so come the early 70s, the OECD realized that unless there was a coherent effort with a focus on energy, that the world's energy supply could be disrupted again. And so the IEA was created. It really is dedicated to the oil and gas supply. It does policy work and analysis, but it is also expanding, and it is now interested in hydrogen. You see the big blue circle in the middle? That's the IEA. It was created by a treaty. Now, the same treaty that created it, and this is going back to international law, it's not all bad, because somebody back then, when this was created, had some brilliant ideas. They created a pathway that's almost like a skunk works or a startup. It's called an implementing agreement. The modern term is technology collaboration program. Whatever, the idea is that any two members of the OECD can get together and say, we want to work on X technology, on R&D, and they can do it. And they basically can make most of their own rules, and they function from the bottom up. And so all those little spokes that go around the IEA, SUN, those represent implementing agreements. And that's one of the one there you see, that's us. So that's how we got started. Now, the OECD money comes from our member governments and it flows down to the IEA. But the money that funds us comes as an extra contribution from each of our members. Okay, all right, so this is what's happened over the last 5 or so years that have made things different, because as many of you in this room know, hydrogen has been around a long time. Indeed, the implementing agreement has been around since 1977. So there has been a long-term recognition that hydrogen has great potential. But we all know that there was COP in 2015. Then the Japanese, who we all know are energy resource challenge, decided they were going to be the world's first hydrogen society. There is an entity called Mission Innovation. It's actually an initiative among governments to double research projects. That got that got launched, and hydrogen was adopted as one of the work streams. There was a declaration in Linz among folks from the EU to adopt hydrogen and put it into the EU's energy platform, and that is not at all insignificant. And then we had the IPCC report that said, guess what, guys, you got 12 years. And then Japan is determined to support this transition. They made what is called a voluntary contribution to the IEA. Remember I mentioned that most of the money flows from member governments? This was a special contribution. And this contribution funded a report. Andrew just talked about that report. I'll mention it later. And then they organized the first ministerial meeting September a year ago. The next one will be held in September this year. And in between, the FCHJU, which is the European Commission's equivalent of the Department of Energy hydrogen program, they launched a hydrogen roadmap. And the IEA delivered its hydrogen report just this past June. And as I said, there will be a second ministerial meeting. So what's this all about now? Why all this fuss? Well, the trend is clearly that versatile, flexible hydrogen is being recognized in all kinds of segments. You can just take a look at this list. All of these have at least beyond demonstration projects, early market introduction. And in the case of the logistics vehicle, we've made actually great progress. They are competitive with battery-powered forklifts. And the reason this happened is because we've got scale. The reason we had this opportunity. We got scale because the Department of Energy devoted some of its supplemental money from the Obama administration to forklifts and to putting them on the street. But we also got light rail trains, the maritime. More than 90% of commerce in the world, occurs via the maritime, and just all of these applications down to airplanes and drones. So they're not insignificant, because we know that hydrogen as a fuel and energy carrier, it will help to support the energy transition, enabling renewables and distributing energy across all sectors in a decarbonized fashion. So you're going to hear this list all day long. This is a list of some of the strategic hydrogen advantages. The only thing we haven't really sort of mentioned yet this morning is for sector coupling. 15 years ago, the work on hydrogen was mostly focused on fuel cells. And so the fuel cells have specific applications, so the hydrogen went directly to the fuel cell to power something. So now, however, we're talking about the fact that hydrogen is really cross-sectoral, and you can integrate all of these sectors. And this makes a huge difference in the paradigm. And so it can be used for stability in the grid, balancing and buffering the system. It can use captured hydrogen, and it can avoid CO2 capture from the air. So, okay, but let's talk about production. After this phase 15 years ago where we were working with the fuel cells, and fuel cells were making great progress, then we started to say, well, where's the hydrogen going to come from? And so all of the scientists turned their attention to hydrogen. So what you see on the screen, hydrogen production, is an overview that is by no means comprehensive, but an overview of pathways today and tomorrow for hydrogen production. The schematic at the bottom shows you in the near term, in this corner, then proceeding out to the long term. So now we're dealing with hydrogen from fossil fuel, and we'll probably be dealing with that in the future because we're going to need it. And then from renewables, conventional and advanced electrolysis, photoelectrochemical technologies, solar thermochemical technologies, and a word about electrolysis. Electrolysis is the magic transformer, and these electrolyzers have been around a long time. They're available in, the sizes are scaling up. Most big companies still use other people's money to buy the big ones. Like Shell put one in a big refinery in the Rhineland, and well, they used FCHJU money, but they are scaling up and they're proving out. And so we have high temperature electrolyzers and low temperature electrolyzers, and increasingly they're able to adapt to the intermittent nature of renewable energies. So, what other pathways? We have this thing called electrofuels, also called power to hydrogen and hydrogen to X. This is one of our tasks. Power to hydrogen means that you take the electrolysis and you split water and you use the hydrogen for something. And you can use it for all kinds of things. You can, and you're going to see a bunch of them in just 1 minute through a couple of other schematics. You can split water and use the hydrogen for mobility. You take the green hydrogen, the renewable hydrogen that you produce from the sun and the wind. And so when you don't need it because the grid is saturated or because this is your design, you put it through an electrolyzer to produce, power for mobility, power for fuel, power for industry, and then power to gas. And all the way over here to storage as well, if you don't need it at the time. So here's another schematic to show you, again, sort of how this occurs. So when we take the electrolyzer, over here we have our renewable power. It's low cost now, as has already been said, which is a wonderful thing indeed. It's enabling a huge amount of transformation. So you take the electrolyzer and it can power for all kinds of applications, but it can also, you see in the middle here, and this is pertaining to this conference, you can also mix it with CO2, and you can mix it from biomass or gas, and create a methanized synfuel, or you can simply blend it directly into the gas grid. Now this is where I want to mention a project. There are so many projects. There are so many demonstrations around the world, and also projects that are past the demonstration phase. But this one really should be mentioned. It's called the H21 project in Leeds. Leeds is a town in northern England. And the people in the UK really know how to count. So they did this study very carefully. The bottom line is that they want to convert their total infrastructure in Leeds, their gas infrastructure, which in Europe is called the gas grid. They want to convert it to hydrogen. And they want to start by blending the gas with hydrogen. And they have proven out that this is going to be cost effective. So it's just, it's really a wonderful thing. And it's probably going to be adopted in England, and we're hoping so, and in other places in the world. Now, storage. Okay, let me just go back for 1 second. See this, the storage here thing, the little storage on the left, salt caverns, storage and storage tanks. Storage is extremely important because, as other speakers have said, you can store hydrogen in the short, mid, long term, and on a seasonal basis. And it's not really necessarily a really slam dunk easy thing to do. This is one of our modeler's diagrams of what you have to think about when you want to store and when you want to retrieve. So it's going to be pretty complicated across the sectors, but the point is that it's possible and it's being looked at all over the world. And it's already proven because we have depleted oil reservoirs that we use anyway. This is another that we've been using for years. So here's another picture of sector storage and sector coupling to enable system integration. And this is actually done by one of our sister fossil TCPs. And so it's pretty clear that they understand that they're going to be mixing hydrogen and carbon. And they know, and they're looking forward to it. And here's another just sort of a slide that was intended to say we can transport it near and far, and then we can distribute it. And here's the point that it's going to be really important. This is why this is really, the ante has been upped, because now it's global trade. Because if you look here, you'll see we've got overseas processes and domestic processes. So you can take this power that you produce in Australia, Australia is a big player, so is Japan, so is Germany, so is the Netherlands. You can produce hydrogen. You see down here, you produce it, and like LNG, you know, which we put 15 years in this country into developing the legal framework to allow this to happen, so it exists. So we can transport it by ocean, and then we can take it to wherever it's going to go, and we can take the hydrogen out of it on the other end, and we can do the same thing with renewables. So Andrew already mentioned that the IEA has released a report. I'd be happy to talk to anyone about this report and its recommendations. And so here's a little bit more about what if you want more information about some of the basics, you can look on our website, and you can also look on our website for a table that covers policies and activities. So you'll be covered you'll be up to snuff for what's going on around the world. So this is how we see our future, coordinating with the IEA and our sister TCPs, and in the international arena with all of you good folks. And with that, I thank you very much for your attention.